Okay, I think we're going to get going, everybody. So if the CAC and other folks can take their seats, that would be terrific. And I'm Wig Zamor. I'm going to hand it off to Ed almost immediately. And we usually ask if there's any questions from the audience or from the CAC before we start. They need to be brief if there are. If not, we'll just launch right into it, and we'll have questions after each presentation as we have in the past. Okay, I think it's yours.
Thank you. Very quickly, this is the third and final night in which we will hear from the respondents to the RFQ. Obviously, I'm very grateful for all the time and the effort that the members and that the public have spent in this effort. I want to say that once again, this evening we will see a media presentation. We have asked each of the development teams to make those presentations, whether they be a PowerPoint or some other media, that they be made available to us, and we will have all of them posted on the Economic Development webpage by the end of the day tomorrow, Amanda. Well, all 9 of them will be up there. We urge you to go back to look at the RFQ standards and the evaluation standards that we included within the RFQ. We ask that you go through each of the respondents along with the presentations that you'll see here. I'd ask that the members of the CAC go back to what we discussed at that first meeting and to talk about what's important to you as an individual and what's important as a person who's a part of the city. So with that, we are going to have 3 presentations. The first presentation is Samuels and Associates. Peter, are you going to make the presentation? All right, so Peter Sargarides from Samuels and Associates. Would you like to start?
Thank you, Ed. Good evening. My name is Peter Sargarides, and I am a principal at Samuels and Associates. I'd like to, first of all, apologize. My partner, Joel Sklar, was supposed to share the podium with me here this evening, but he's homesick and called me at 4 o'clock saying there's no way he can get out of bed, so I get a little more airtime tonight. So first of all, thank you. Thank you to the CAC. Thank you to the Somerville Redevelopment Authority and everyone else in the Union Square neighborhood who's been part of the process that has come out here this evening. We think it's a great opportunity. We are happy to be part of this opportunity and think it's a very unique opportunity, in one of the most unique opportunities in the Boston metro area in affecting a neighborhood and how a neighborhood grows and changes over time. My goal here this evening is to let you know a little bit about who we are, who Samuels is, and what our, not only our skill set, but our approach to neighborhood building. And part of doing that, I'm going to give some specific examples of how we've done it in other neighborhoods, specifically in the Fenway and other neighborhoods in Boston. Just as a simple introduction of who we are based in Boston. We're based Newbury Street in Boston. We are louder. Is that better? Okay, great. Okay, sorry about that. We are based in Boston. We're a mid-sized firm. We're a firm that builds and owns and manages our own properties for the long term. Steve Samuels is the chairman and founder of the firm, and he is a 3rd generation in the real estate development business. Even though we've developed projects around the country, we're really focused in the city and have decided that we like to work close to home. A little bit about our team structure, and I think this is hard to read and it's not important on the details other than the point is that every project, especially a project as complicated as Union Square, requires a multidisciplinary team. Internally, we have a team of experts. We like to get our hands dirty, as I say, and get into the nitty-gritty. Not only do we have our own development management folks, we have our own leasing folks, folks who oversee our construction, finance, and management as well. So from the ground up, we like to get involved in a lot of the details. We put together a team of experts in different fields in terms of engineering, architecture, and so forth. With me here this evening, I'd like to just point out our team, Mike Samuels and Noah Maslin over at the computer would be part of our development management team in the office. We also have Scott Pollock from Arrow Street Architects, not only a great architect and a great friend, he's also a neighbor in Union Square and lives in Union Square. And Tim Stoll from Biomed Realty, who's our strategic partner in helping us figure out the innovative life sciences perspective here and how to bring that into Union Square. A little bit about our approach. I know sometimes people like to talk about real estate development in terms of buildings and how tall and what the massing is like or what the architecture is like. But what we like to look at is the streetscape. What does it feel like at the pedestrian level, at the sidewalk? That's one of the first experiences that most people have with a building when they're walking down the sidewalk, and how does the building feel? What is the retail tenancy like? What is the streetscape? And so, as we like to call it, we start with the streetscape and the streetscape end up, and how does that fit into the existing fabric of a neighborhood? Some of the components when we work on a project like this, which is not just about building a building, but it's really about building a neighborhood and working within the existing fabric of a neighborhood. Our first component that we look at is the vision or master planning, sitting with all the stakeholders, trying to figure out what everyone is looking for and listen to the different perspectives. And not everybody agrees with what their goals might be, but I think it's important, we feel it's important to listen to them all and try to synthesize those. The next step is understanding the existing neighborhood and the history that it has. And we've done that in the Fenway successfully, in Alston recently, in Grove Hall, and I'll talk about some of those examples, but trying to capture the essence of the neighborhood and build on that and not lose that. Seeding the neighborhood. A great example, you saw JT with CrossFit that we put into the Fenway. How do we bring different uses within the neighborhood? Union Square has done a great job with the restaurants, bringing in seeding, what we call seeding a neighborhood with early uses that start to give the neighborhood a bit of its own feel and unique character, and building on that. Land assemblage, absolutely critical. Without land control, very little is possible. In the Fenway, as an example, we've acquired over 16 parcels, individual parcels of land over the years to try to effectuate a master plan there. And then building the vision, actually building and delivering on those commitments. So again, when you look at that, these are some of the ways that we approach a task that we see at Union Square, which is how do you take multiple parcels, how do you build on the existing neighborhood and make it all feel like it's been there. Some of the examples over the years where we've gone into neighborhoods, and again, each neighborhood is a little bit different. I think Grove Hall is a great example where the local community group had for years tried to build a retail center, and Grove Hall section of Boston is a pretty tough neighborhood, and the city, the former Mayor Menino, had asked us to come in and help the neighborhood group. So we were able to get a supermarket and other retailers, a bank, and other retailers to come in, make commitments, and we built out the retail center there. And that had a profound effect on helping Grove Hall, actually giving them a sense of place. And even though this was a little more suburban than we would normally do in an urban center, this is what the neighborhood was looking for. They were looking for a supermarket, some of the basic necessities that didn't exist. And so this was a great success story in terms of helping revitalize a neighborhood. In the Fenway, and I'll talk a little bit more in detail about the Fenway and what we've done there over the 15 years that we've been involved in the neighborhood. Barry's Corner in Alston, another area. We were selected by Harvard University about 18 months ago out of a field of almost 40 developers, and Harvard was looking for somebody to come in and help jumpstart part of their Alston program. And what the neighborhood what the Alston neighborhood and Harvard were looking for was someone that can help facilitate a development that will create a sense of place with retail, with residential, and become a center for the neighborhood and for Harvard. And we just broke ground on this building last week, so I think everyone is excited about this coming together very quickly. So that would have been Joel's portion. Now I'm going to do my presentation. So the goal of this next section is really to get a little bit in depth on Fenway. We really view it as a way to help you understand how we really do things and how we approach things. I'm going to play a short 60-second slide. We actually had a documentary filmmaker come in about 6 months ago and capture film around the Fenway. We were trying to capture the essence of Fenway beyond the ballpark that everybody talks about when you hear the words Fenway. So I'm just going to play this quick clip.
I hadn't heard about Fenway Park my whole life and had no idea that it was named after the neighborhood it was in.
What I didn't expect living in Fenway was all the green space and then being so close to all of these amazing cultural institutions.
In large part is what we're excited about in the early stage of the renewal of the historic area. You get to see it kind of come back to being a place that is lively and younger. The neighborhood has like infinite potential.
Here you can walk downtown in 10 minutes. It's different from every other neighborhood you'd find in the city.
We're always looking for great restaurants and places to go out to after work.
A lot more students will stick around. In fact, the city really cares about retaining all of this talent.
When you say Fenway, people only think about Fenway, Red Sox, Fenway Park. We've been here longer than that.
We didn't choose the Fenway chose us. It just seemed like the absolute perfect spot for our growth as artists and entrepreneurs.
Thank you. So, 1998 in the Fenway. Here's an aerial that shows Boylston Street and all of the adjacent properties dominated by automobiles, parking lots. And not too dissimilar from some of the uses you'd find in Union Square. Goodyear was one of the uses. We happen to have the fast food restaurants and gas stations. This is about the time that the neighborhood and the city came together and really coalesced around trying to figure out what the next stage of Fenway is. How do we build upon the neighborhood that exists there while also dealing with the pressures of development from Fenway Park wanting to build a new park, the growth of the Longwood Medical Area, and all of these institutional uses pushing up against a residential neighborhood that existed there or exists. We spent over 4 years with the neighborhood and the city working on a rezoning effort. The new zoning was enacted in 2004. In between sort of the 98 to 2004 time frame, we worked with the neighborhood in terms of trying to help them try to build consensus with different stakeholders. There were 3 different neighborhood groups there that we worked with. We took the lead in master planning and really bringing our developer expertise to the table in terms of trying to figure out whether some of the desires that the neighborhood folks wanted are realistic, and we could test those out with different models. And the result of that was the zoning being enacted in 2004, and 10 years later, I think the city and the neighborhood feel like that's been a success story. What the neighborhood was looking for has been realized and continues to be realized. One of the things that we spent a lot of time with the neighborhood was pedestrian paths. It wasn't just about how tall the buildings are and what the massing is, but pedestrian paths. And the green paths there represent side streets and pedestrian paths. We even looked at, and we are building new streets, I should say, in order to try to break down the larger blocks there and give additional retail storefronts and give the pedestrians more right-of-way over the cars. And ultimately, it was a very simple goal. What the neighborhood really boiled it down to is they were looking for an urban village, and we helped the neighborhood figure out what that urban village, how to actually effectuate that urban village and what that actually means. Some of the ways we did that, our first project that was built, a mixed-use project of residential and retail, the Fenway Triangle Trilogy project, was actually what I would call a guinea pig for the zoning. We were working with the city and the neighborhood on this project at the same time that the zoning was being worked on. And in a way, I think about D2 being similar in that D2 is the first parcel to come to the table. It's a sizable parcel. It'll set the tone for the rest of Union Square. And when we worked with the neighborhood, we sat with a blank slate and we said, what would you like to see? Where would you like to see the massing? What kind of uses would you like to see? It was a very cooperative process that we worked through. The project that followed on, 1330 Boylston Street, was actually the first project to be built under the new zoning that was enacted in '04. And this project also included a very creative, in a very creative fashion, we built a new headquarters for Fenway Community Health Center that was a great anchor for the neighborhood, and we helped them grow from a very small facility that they had previously. And beyond just building new, we've also been taking some of the older warehouse buildings here, like you see the 3-story building in the foreground. We've been renovating some of the existing warehouse buildings and turning them into great mixed-use buildings with retail and office space, and working those into the context with the new buildings that are being built. So when I talk about seeding the neighborhood, it's a very simple concept. So in the Fenway, for instance, of the 16 different parcels that we acquired, some were destined for longer term development, to be developed in the long term. So the Goodyear, for instance, in the lower photographs there, we turned into a CrossFit, and JT, who's here, got his business started here, and actually eventually grew this into another facility down the street. On the upper photograph, Tasty Burger, we turned the old mobile gas station into a Tasty Burger, which was the start of the Tasty Burger concept that eventually recently opened into Harvard Square. And again, all of this is meant to give some of these old derelict buildings a new life and make them fit into the neighborhood. Some of the other components that we think about and that are important in any neighborhood, other forms of transportation beyond the car. In the Fenway, for instance, we've been promoting not just the T usage, but we've sponsored the Hubway. We brought Hubway to our buildings. Zip cars have been a huge amenity and also have helped us allow us to build less parking in our buildings. As we see the parking demands going down, we're actually, we think there's a whole new metric, and we think that'll be applicable here too, as we have the new T-stop. Sustainability and open space, another important component of our projects. Not only open space within our buildings, but working with the neighborhood on creating public open spaces. And we've worked in the Fenway neighborhood and building a pocket park out of an abandoned lot there. And lastly, I'd like to just touch on Landmark Center and a new vision that we have for Landmark Center. This is a great icon of a building that's been in the neighborhood since 1928 and was redeveloped about 10 or 15 years ago by the Abbey Group. We purchased the building a few years ago, and as one of the lead tenants decided to vacate the building, we really looked at it in a completely different light. And one of our goals here is really to celebrate the history of the building. That's an old concrete warehouse, and we want to open that up. This is a rendering of the ground floor plane that we're opening up into a food hall that will be anchored by a Wegmans supermarket and all kinds of food retailers, specialty food retailers. The other piece of Landmark that's very interesting and I think applicable here to Union Square is really using some of the unique spaces and using, for instance, this is a photograph of the tower space at Landmark that we've turned into office space and bringing in some of the younger startup tech companies from Cambridge. We actually brought 2 new tech companies from Cambridge over the last 6 months, and since they've been in our building, they've been growing leaps and bounds. So that's the kind of innovation that we'd like to bring to Somerville Union Square as well. This is some of the office space that we'll be renovating and again, turning into an innovative office space. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Scott Pollock to talk in a little more detail about Union Square and the vision for Union Square. Glad to answer any questions at the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Peter. My name is Scott Pollock. I'm a principal with Arrow Street Architects. I'm also a resident. I live on Oxford Street behind the Mission Church and the VFW. This is sort of my neighborhood. As some of you know, I was involved, the pleasure of being involved with Summer Vision and watched all of the different sort of planning processes that have gone on for Union Square in the last few years to try to sort of really understand it. And one of the first things that we do is sort of really start to try to understand it. And one of the things that's clear to us as a team is the extent of Union Square. I mean, Union Square runs all the way up to Somerville Ave at where Bow Street hits it, and is the key. I mean, we understand where the parcels are, which I don't refer to by P numbers. I call it Radiator Parcel and Ricky's, and because that's how I know them. But it runs, and it becomes the beginning of how eventually Boynton Yards will open up, and how Somerville Ave and Washington will run down to the future grounded McGrath Highway, and how that has the potential to open up the gateway sites and make real connections between Union Square and Brick Bottom that people feel comfortable and safe walking up and down. What happens to the gateway site, what happens to the old transfer station site. So we've already started to spend some time trying to analyze the existing patterns, as well as trying to understand, this is a terrible slide to read, I apologize, but also trying to really understand what are the other changes in the other infrastructure associated. McGrath coming to the ground, the state's plans for that. What are the community's plans for the changes in sort of the way the roadways work, and a lot of the good hard work that people have been doing in Union Square. And those are the things that we are interested in participating in. We do not claim to have the answers, but we want to be part of that conversation and understanding the way the whole thing works together and what implications it's going to have. We recognize that the parcels are not Union Square. Union Square is a much bigger place. The side of Union Square that I spend most of my time in is up at the Bow Street end. And what happens on the parcels will have an impact on the rest of Union Square. And we are concerned and interested in participating in all of that process. And that's sort of how both Samuels and Arrow Street try to work. We are probably most known for Cambridge Side Galleria. It was a project, and obviously we're not going to propose building a mall here, but I'm very proud of this project. 25 years on, we still have good relationships with the community. We spend a lot of time with the community, and this really was a good project that really sort of built density at one end of an existing community, a community which still exists today. I'm still dealing with the same community folks we dealt with 25 years ago when we built this in the neighborhood behind it, and that matters. We do a lot of active public space design. Some of these projects are down in DC. I was involved in helping MIT rethink the base of Tech Square and how to get those restaurants and some real use out of that public space there. We did the work in Harvard Square years ago, building the parking garage, but that was actually part of the Harvard Square Businessmen's Association in working on the street improvements. So the garage was actually part of the street improvement program, when all the landscaping and the trees and the plants and all that other stuff got added to Harvard Square. And of course, we worked with Bill Shea, who was a great friend of ours in the firm, when Ames Envelope became available, and trying to understand how to reuse that space, how to get Artists Asylum in there, and of course working with Brooklyn Boulders, which we were the architects for at our Christmas party there not that long ago. And of course, we've done a lot of work recently with both Biomed, who unfortunately I'm now going to use up his time, as well as with MIT Investments on taking a number of buildings in Cambridge Port and in areas around Kendall Square. The building in the lower left is an old parking garage that was derelict for a long time that we've been renovating buildings into innovation space, which relates back to what Peter was saying about how you seed the neighborhood, that the way you keep the existing context is to reuse it and use it in new and interesting ways, and we know how to do that. We've done a lot of that, and this team has done a lot of it as a group. Pointing the wrong way. And then, of course, the last piece, when we did Grove Hall with Joel Sklar, who wasn't here tonight, one of the projects that came out of there is what's called Boston Main Streets, which is a program by which the city helps local businessmen understand how to improve their stores and their presence on the street to sort of really help them be competitive in the existing marketplace. Joel, who's not here tonight, is still the chairman of Boston Main Streets, and our street continues to do most of the work for the Boston Main Streets group in going out and helping local tenants sort of figure out what they can do with their store to provide a level of professional service that they wouldn't be able to get otherwise. And then lastly, I'll leave it on a Biomed project. This is a new project that we're doing for Biomed at 450 Kendall. There's no street, which is near the old industrial canal, which is a new appropriately scaled building. It's a new innovation building. It's the kind of scale that we'd probably be looking at in Union Square. The public space component of it is integral to the design of the building itself and its relationship to the public open space. So I think we are out of time. So unfortunately, I ate up all of Tim's time. Oh, last piece, Wonderland Station. People have asked about our relationship to the T. We just finished opening the most recent, and only in recent memory, new mainline T station in the system at Wonderland for the Blue Line, which opens up the view to the water, and a key component of the design of the station was the plaza associated with the station. So it's not a station on a subway line, it's a plaza. It's a place for people that happens to have a subway station attached to it.
Great, thank you. So are there questions from the CAC? Yeah, come on, Mimi.
So I actually have 3 questions for you this time. My standard one about what are your weaknesses as a team, what do you see as your challenge, and how will you mitigate your weaknesses? What do you see as the challenges for the organization? And then can you talk a little bit about how you helped at the Ames complex? Be a little more specific.
Sure. Do you want to just answer that?
Yeah, I'll start with the Ames to give him a moment to think. When it became clear that the family was no longer going to be actually making envelopes and paper products at the site, Bill Shea asked me and my partner Sean Selby, who he lives on Winter Hill, to come in along with one of my retired partners to sort of help them think about what could you do with the building that would be both financially appropriate but also open to the community. So we spent a long time with Bill sort of working out how do you break the building up, how do you create spaces within the building for uses like the Artist's Asylum that use the building to the advantages that it has without costing so much money that the rent would be outrageous for a tenant to be able to do that kind of activity, which you could never afford to do in a new building. And then we got brought in and met the guys from Brooklyn Boulders and figured out how do you put that rock climbing gym and how do you add it. So we were actually the architects for the rock climbing gym. And we worked with Bill Shea and his successors on how you actually break the building up to put tenants into the existing building. Does that answer your question?
Thank you, Scott. So the question of our weakness, that interesting question, and knowing that it will be asked, we talked a little bit about it. And I think from our perspective, we think our weakness might be that we're not the largest firm here out of the field of 9 developers, and that we're a smaller size firm. Mitigating that, or what's the positive of that, I guess I would say, is that it allows us as partners, myself, Joel, Steve, Tom, to spend more time on projects, and there's more personal involvement in these projects, and we feel like we live and breathe these projects rather than it's just another project. And the question of the challenge, our greatest challenge, we think that the land assemblage is a challenge. Again, the city has done a great job and has a parcel that's ready to go, but in order to really complete the neighborhood and make it feel whole, there's a lot of land assemblage that has to be done. A challenge, we're not daunted by it. We've done it in the Fenway over the years. I spent many years sitting with people for years trying to convince them to sell parcels, and having assembled 16 parcels to try to complete or effectuate a master plan. We think it's a challenge, but something that we can tackle.
Great. Any other questions? We have time for another question. Come on up. Come on up.
My name is John, and I'm from the Somerville Community Corporation, and I'm familiar with your Grove Hall project, and I would just like to know what other community groups or group did you work with to get that project completed?
Scott, do you want to?
Sure.
Because that was
yeah, actually, I worked with Samuels on that project. We worked with Grove Hall CDC. And as a matter of fact, Samuels was not the owner and is not the owner. Actually, the CDC owns the project. They essentially were a not-for-profit developer. In that particular, the sister actually owns and runs it. And as Joel said at one of the previous meetings, you know, we had all sorts of community set-asides and concern about local hiring. And believe me, sister was on the site every day, counting heads, making sure we met our commitments. So believe me, we met our commitments. We're still partners. We still help them out when they sort of need help. There are a whole range, that led to a whole range of sort of other associations. Joel is actually the chairman, the Western not the chairman, he's on the board at the Western Comunidad. He actually sucked me in, and I'm on their development committee to help them. And the staff sort of worked their way through, in particular the BRA process in Boston, and I spent a bunch of time with that. I also I was the architect for the women's lunch place in the Back Bay, and when we converted that space last year to actually make it a nice place for the ladies instead of the basement that it had been for a very long time. So this is actually a group that has a lot of sort of community associations and actually spends a bunch of time. And Noah has a sort of background in that world as well, and it's actually something that we really care about. It's one of the things that leads us to do this kind of work, is because that's what actually we're interested in. So.
I think we got to bring the next group up, but thanks so much for your presentation. Thank you. Ed, do you want to introduce them, or? I think that's how we've been doing it. But.
Just real quick, I want to recognize Alderman Mark Needingham is here from Ward 4. Ward 5. Sorry about that, Mark. And I make this announcement at every meeting. If there are questions that you would like to ask that, that come to you later, please email either myself or Amanda. I know I received a couple of questions from Eric last week after our meeting. We will make sure that those are posed to each of the 9 teams. So don't be shy, but if you want to just ask anything via an email message, we're more than happy to do that. So the next group is the Abbey Group of Boston. Bill, David, do you want to start? Anyone?
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for having us here this evening. I'm David Epstein. I'm president of the Abbey Group. With me is our development team, as well as representatives from Brunner Cott and Associates, the lead architect that we'll be partnering with. Presenting with me will be Bill Caravori from the Abbey Group. And we welcome the opportunity to answer any questions that you may have at the end of the presentation. Union Square, looking back. You jumped one slide forward. Historically, a layered hub. Historically, a layered hub of retail, commercial, restaurants. Virtually all of the Abbey Group developments that we've done, and we've been in neighborhoods from Beacon Hill, Boston, Allston, Cambridge, Dorchester, have all been rooted in urban environments, and they have historical backgrounds. So we always look back at what a place was to help inform what the future of Union Square could be. And as you can see from that first slide on the upper left, Union Square was actually once had taller buildings, a little higher density. It was transit-based, and it was very successful. And over time, it lost that character. And now, looking forward, we like to think. Next slide, please. Looking forward, we like to let the past inform the future. T will be introduced. Union Square was and is an urban village, and in this context, we want to make it a 21st century environment to live, work, and play while never forgetting where it came from. We like to think that our core values match very well with the Summer Vision core values, and that is that we engage in community-inspired development. We personally invest for the long term, and in that context, we are the developers and we are the managers of all Abbey Group-owned properties. We are highly selective in the projects that we do. We don't dart all over the map. Everything that we've done has been in Boston or metropolitan Boston area. We engage in long-term interactions with the communities. Where we've worked, our buildings, many have been for 10, 15, 20, 25 years of community involvement. So we like to think of ourselves as not just developers, but as good neighbors, because we understand ultimately the success of our buildings is going to be dependent on how well the entire community does. The big challenge. This will be Bill's time to take over for a moment.
Hello. So the challenge then, the challenge for Union Square, well, hello? Okay. The challenge is, well, the challenge is to get it right, meaning to get the ambition of the city and the neighborhood has been expressed through Summer Vision and all the work that's already happened before, and it actually, as will be brought further into focus in the community process ahead. That's the challenge, but really what's interesting here is the opportunity. The opportunity at Union Square is exciting and unique. You know, typically when a master developer is asked to come into a place, it's because there's nothing there. You know, it's an abandoned rail yard or old dockyards or things that are just, that have nothing. What's so compelling and what's got us so interested in Union Square is that that's not the case. That's not the case at all. There is this awesome, vibrant, diverse neighborhood that is really on the way up, that we have to work with. And the fact that it exists with these parcels, these underutilized or in some cases damaged parcels, the fact that the Union Square is still able to be working hard towards its future, even amongst these parcels, is really inspiring and compelling. So when we think about Union Square, we think about one fundamental thought, and that is that the Union Square job here really is to protect Union Square itself, protect this vibrant culture, the scene that is there, and the work that's already happening towards moving forward. So that, you know, if you use that as the basis, then you think about, okay, so there is the job of a master developer, and the master developer has got to what's its purpose? Why is there one? Well, in our opinion, it's to put in place ideas that can carry a community forward. That's really, I mean, that's what the real opportunity is here. And so where are these ideas going to come from? Well, they're going to come from you and the community process that's going to come, but they should also come from the master developer. And that's our obligation as we see it. And so we have some ideas that we think that are perfect for Union Square, and so I'll just touch on them here. Cultivating an eco-district, nurturing an arts district, and building and investing for the creative economy. And on the fourth bullet point, creating and investing for the creative economy, what does that mean? Well, so the businesses that are going to come to Union Square, and the reason why it's so fundamental for us for every step along the way to make sure that we protect the best parts of Union Square, are because those are the parts that are going to make the developments of D2 and the other parcels a success. What are these creative economy tenants? Well, they're biotech, the information technology companies, startup companies that right now have got the people living in the neighborhood that then work their way over to Kendall Square or down to the Seaport Innovation District, getting those people with those 5,000 to 25,000 square foot users into buildings. Biotech company, very much the same way. You know, we have the experience of dealing with these kinds of tenants. We've got a lab building over in Cambridge that is a startup building that we have in-house capability to design spaces for them and get them moved in there as quickly as possible. And then also the aggregated healthcare business. We think that is something that is a tendency or an industry that is going to appreciate what it is that Union Square has going for it. And also recognize the fact that the healthcare industry is underserved here in Somerville in as dense a population as it is. So when you have all these ideas, the ideas that are going to come out of the community process, our ideas, how do you move forward with them? Well, you need a dedicated team, and we've got a great team. And you can see them up there, but I'd like to just point out a couple. Brunner and Associates, our lead architect, just down the road on Prospect Street. And they've done, I don't know, they've been working with us forever. And Charlie Rose, another good friend, and has been working with us for a long time as well, actually a Somerville resident, or Somerville business. But I'd also like to point out our arts team. We've got a really compelling, interesting arts team. Michael van Valkenburg, who is an undisputed, I'd say, force in bringing artistic landscape design in the urban context. And then also Joe Thompson from MassMocha and Rick Lowe, also leaders in facilitating arts into communities. Oh, and then the last one I wanted to point out was Arab, out of New York, and they're generally considered to be the premier, the leader in eco-district work. And we'll talk about that a little bit. Go ahead.
I think that you'll, as you go through this interview process, you'll recognize that most of the developers here achieved a highly advantageous category in terms of the qualifications we think were there. But I think that we're also uniquely suited for this, and we're going to use two examples of work that we've done in urban areas to help point that out. One is in the Fenway, and one area that we've been extensively involved with, as well as Downtown Crossing. We acquired Landmark Center in 1996. It had been I think we were the fourth major developer, and probably the smallest developer in the group to undertake that project. It was a 1.5 million square foot, what was then considered a black hole in the Fenway. It basically prevented, because of its, it made the Fenway T-stop virtually inaccessible, a dangerous place to go to. It was a derelict building. And when we took that over in 1996, we worked diligently with the local communities, the Fenway Community Development Corporation and the Fenway Civic Association. We spoke extensively about our vision of Landmark Center as opposed to the prior visions. And our vision was a pedestrian-oriented, externally oriented retail, interconnecting all of the fabric of the old Fenway with this new project and creating new pedestrian access. And we worked deeply with the MBTA to make the Fenway Green Line, which was rebuilt shortly after we completed our work. It became one of the more vibrant Green Line stations, and we had an excellent experience working with them. It also involved significant amounts of transportation infrastructure. What was called the Sears Rotary was a dysfunctional traffic concern. It was on the high priority list for the neighborhood people. They felt that because of the signaling of the wide streets and because of the incessant traffic, that accessibility from their neighborhood, which was somewhat isolated from the T, made it very difficult. So we were the first to go in there, do a significant transportation analysis. We re-signaled the light, and we re-signaled, and we changed some of the road patterns, and we put in new pedestrian walkways. And notwithstanding the significant amount of new business that we brought to the Fenway through the Landmark Center, we were able to actually reduce traffic and make it a much safer environment for pedestrian crossing. And actually begin to weave that derelict parcel into the fabric of the West Fenway. Now, the West Fenway was relatively unaffected architecturally because of this, because there were distinct road separations between these developments and the Boylston Street developments. But these all took place in a manner that allowed the essence of the West Fenway to remain, but also provided opportunities for new business. We worked with the Fenway CDC to create walk-to-work programs where some of the money, some of the jobs opportunities funds that were generated from the Landmark Center were used to improve community relations with our primary tenant then, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and the retail tenants, and all of that wove together and made Landmark Center a part of the Fenway community without destroying the character of the Fenway. I think Bill will now talk about some of the housing that we did there.
Okay, so with the success of Landmark Center, it paved the way for well, the first new residential building to get built in the Fenway in a while. And this building on the left is it's most known for successfully integrating itself into what was at the time all lower buildings, residential buildings, apartment buildings. And it's important to the neighborhood because at the time that we built this, as you heard from Samuels, the neighborhood is in the middle of rezoning, and we also were very involved in that. And this building was seen as a validation that you could build a larger building with a dense number of apartments in it in a way that was sympathetic and worked well with the neighborhood, and basically showed that the zoning was going to work. And it was seen as a validation, I'd say, by the neighborhood. It's clever design, and the materials taken from the context of the neighborhood itself proved that would work. Well, and then the second building on the right is going on now, and it's the Viridian, and it's important to the community in a different way. This is really the result of this new zoning, and it's the product of the evolution of the neighborhood and the evolution of the goals of the neighborhood. And for this building, the goals of the neighborhood were more in terms of what could the development bring to the neighborhood, and how could it benefit the neighborhood. And the two things that came out were affordable housing, and from the very beginning, there was an expression, a real need for a community center, which we were on board with from the beginning. And so, from an affordable housing perspective, we have the most affordable housing, on-site affordable housing of anyone in the neighborhood, and I wonder if that might even be, if it could be stated more broadly than that. And we spent a lot of time on that, and came up with some really creative designs to allow for a real interesting way to bring affordable housing into the community. And then the community center. The community center is also a very interesting thing. It's the first developer-driven community center that I think that the city has undertaken, and it's basically it's a partnership between us and what has really sprung out of the community in terms of a community center working group, and they've come out of the various neighborhood associations and created their own organization, and they hold their own meetings, and then our meeting, and then our meetings, and we're in the process of designing it, and we're gonna build it, and then we are going to give it an operating funding, and basically make sure that it survives and thrives and becomes an amenity for the whole neighborhood. So then moving on, the other neighborhood that we have had significant involvement in, and we think we've made a significant impact on, is downtown Crossing. And I'll just start with 45 Providence, which really is just it's a tall building and a beautiful building. We wouldn't propose anything like that in Union Square, but it's really relevant to talk about it in the context of its historic neighborhood. It's right off of the, it's right across the street from Old City Hall. It's right at the corner of the Freedom Trail, and it really is informed by its neighborhood, and it creates a very intimate residential oasis in this bustling downtown neighborhood. The other thing that we like to point out is, that we like to say is that we could not have, even though we could not have actually brought this property online at a worse time on earth than we did. It came, we opened its doors in 2008 and just got crushed. But we stayed the course with it. You know, one of the benefits of being a private developer, family business, is that we are, we don't have any other constraints pulling us in any other direction. We could sit on this and hold it and protect the people that had already bought in it, and wait until a better day, which we did, and now it's great.
Next slide, please. Lafayette City Center. We acquired this. This is in the heart of downtown. We acquired it in the early, only 5 more minutes? Okay. I'm going to go through this very quickly. The basic point I'd like to make about this building is two. One is that we worked significantly with all the stakeholders in downtown. We were active participants in the creation of what's called a BID, Boston, a Business Improvement District. So collectively, we put a self-taxing mechanism in, and as a group, I think that we've changed the perception of downtown significantly. And the second point is that this is a building that is ripe for creative industry. We've are attracting them. We understand the needs as they've evolved. It's no longer, tenants aren't interested in moving into a corporate center. They're interested in moving into a city center or an innovation center. And we've done it here, and we're attracting the tenants.
Okay, so what does this all mean for Union Square? So if you start with the fundamental thought that the job is to protect Union Square and the vibrant and thriving neighborhood that is there, while, you know, our two ideas, an arts district and an eco district, put together with the community ideas, and you get the future for Union Square. So go ahead. So what does that look like? Well, an arts district, this is what we see. This is what we see could be. I mean, it's already, you know, it's already an arts district. So really expanding on that in terms of weaving public art into the open spaces and into the parcels that are there, or expanding the vibrant culinary and restaurant scene. I'm the co-founder and the co-owner of, separately from the Abbey Group, the Beehive and the Beat Hotel. I don't know if you've ever been to those, but I come down when I'm not there. I come to Union Square a lot. I love it, creating intentional gathering spaces, outdoor parks, and then another thing that we like to try to promote would be a second floor arts and retail zone, arts business and retail zone. It's more valuable than say second floor residential, but it still is able to provide space for community and arts related businesses that don't have to pay what would be a premium ground floor rent. And then also artistic and ambitious architecture as a way of creating place. Okay, so, and then eco-district. Well, eco-district is basically a systems approach to sustainability that you can do on a scale that you can't do on a building by building version of development. You need density and you need critical mass to be able to do that. And so that involves things like energy conservation programs, but perhaps even something as more ambitious as generation, more larger scale systems for waste management, programs that promote different types of mobility. Anyway, it's a whole systems approach that's not just involved in construction, but also in the operation of buildings. So when you put all that together, what does that mean? Well, So this isn't really meant to be anything. It's really meant to be, I know that when this process gets started, it will involve charrettes just to begin with, and then ultimately a very involved and in-depth community process. And this would be the first way to facilitate a conversation with the community. And we would say, okay, well, these are some of the ideas that we have as a way of coming to common ground, and as a way of starting the conversation. And it's really just to point out that, you know, in using D2 as an example, we're going to, this isn't one big building, this is several buildings, you know, and we've got, say, for example, the orange building to the right there is, you know, is that one building, is that two building? But in any event, it's commercial space that is adjacent to the T-stop, integrated into that, pulled back a little bit and creating some green space. You've got two residential buildings, and that's important as an idea, because it could mean that one of them is a condominium building, and one of them is an apartment building, and maybe that's two, and maybe that's three, you know. And I could keep talking forever.
Thanks very much. Okay, we're really on time, thanks to Amanda. Yes? We can, but the next group has to set up. So, did you have a question?
I was interested in your discussion of the affordable housing, and you said you found some interesting ways. I wondered what percentage was in that building, and what were those interesting ways that you got affordability, increased the affordability there?
Well, what we were able to do is we were able to one of the things we did was we were able to make a really dynamic design in the units by you know, making the units relationship to the outside window wall relative to its overall space much more generous. So there was a lot of windows, and the way we did is we squeezed the building in that area so that there was more windows, so that we could have really awesome units that were a little bit smaller but had a ton of light, and we ended up, once we came up with this design, we ended up doing it a lot more as one thing. And so I believe our percentage is 12% on-site affordable, which equates to 38 units.
Yeah, Mimi, come on. No, come on.
I think I know the question. I could just answer it for her. Well, I'm going to say, I know one question is, what is our weaknesses, right?
Yeah, what challenge do you see in getting this?
Okay. I'll go ahead and answer the first one. Well, one of our weaknesses, I'd say, is that we don't want to be seen as a mom and pop operation here. And we're not. We've got a lot of capacity, and we're very capable, and even though we might be a small fish in a pond full of what may seem bigger fish, we don't act, you know, I would submit that that's not actually a weakness, and you're going to get to know us because we're going to be here a ton, and we own the business, and this is what we're going to do. And then the challenge, right? What?
The biggest challenge here is that you've got a pretty large group of stakeholders, and they're all entitled to weigh in on the process. And frankly, this is something that we like to think that we're very good at, that we're good listeners. I would say another weakness is that we probably don't know as much about Somerville as we ought to know. We don't know as many people. We've met a lot already. but we're going to need to learn, we're going to need to meet a lot more people from Somerville and talk to them. So our job as master developer is going to be, we're going to have to provide leadership, but at the same time, we're going to also have to be good listeners and make sure that if we can't accommodate everybody's lofty goals or minimalist goals for what happens or what changes in Union Square, we can offer an intelligent and thoughtful and creative way to mitigate the differences between how one group of stakeholders, ourselves, and another group of stakeholders may perceive the solutions to be. And we think we're good at it, and frankly, it's the part of this development that I love the most. I love the most is that I have to work within a neighborhood group. I have to satisfy the users of the buildings. I've got tenants. I've got residents. We've got to be loyal and faithful to their interests. We have to create wonderful places to work and wonderful places to live. And it's really the people interaction that ultimately will make this the most successful process.
Great. Thanks an awful lot. I think we need to move on. Are you guys? Okay. Joe, come on. One last question. No, I think we're about out of time, Jane. And, we have time for two?
I'll give you the simplest of the three. You were the only guys to mention the subway, the new station, the new city hall, and the new library. Why?
Why did we mention it?
How would they fit with the rest of the plan? How do they enhance?
Well, I think that the city sees Union Square in the most optimistic and ambitious light that it could hope for. And you know, the Union Square that has these institutions, I think, is the furthest, highest ambition for it. And we would love to be involved in that. I mean, that sounds awesome. I know that Lee has got great ideas for an institutional effort in that regard, and we're totally on board. And we think that it furthers this whole notion of an arts district as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No, I think we got to move on. But Jane, we may have time at the end, and then all the developers could be asked a question. But thanks very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks very much.
Excuse me, sorry. 19, so we're down to the last one. Certainly almost last, absolutely not least, from the Seaport, the Fallon Company, Joe Fallon, David Manfredi. Joe Fallon has left us momentarily, but he'll be right there, so please, bear with us.
Good evening. My name is Joe Fallon. The good news is I am the last developer. Good evening, I'm Joe Fallon, and the good news is I'm the last developer you're going to hear from. Round of applause for the last developer. That's probably the only applause I'll get tonight. I think you've heard a lot from a lot of different developers, but what I want to do is kind of talk about us, who we are and how we work. With me tonight is David Manfredi. David is the principal at Elkus Manfredi, one of my favorite architects. We've done a lot of work together. One of the best things about David is he likes to listen, and he knows how to listen. Tonight, David and I will share with you some thoughts on what we see as opportunities for Union Square. At any point, if you have the format has questions at the end. And I'll probably answer the question about challenges and weaknesses right away. Summervision was a very impressive document. I had read through that a couple times, and I was actually intrigued and impressed at the amount of effort that had gone into that. For us, Summervision actually has a lot of the same values that we would seek when we move forward. And moving forward for us doesn't mean that we would start or end at any one spot. We actually look to the total vision and the total package, not just Union Square, but the surrounding area, and what the impact will be. So as we go through our discussion and presentation, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the benefits and how Union Square as a core can help in the region. So David will start talking really about what we like about Union Square and how we envision Union Square going forward.
Thanks, Joe. What do we love about Union Square? We love the grid of streets, the irregular grid of streets, the scalable, walkable nature of the streets, the diverse mix of shops and restaurants, the kind of grittiness and funkiness that gives it a real kind of street credibility. And we love young people and not so young people living together and playing together. This very authentic cultural diversity, this kind of eclectic vibe that goes with the street. And we know Somervillians love the businesses of Union Square. Elkis Manfredi has about 20 folks who live in Somerville and about 12 that live in Union Square. And we know all the great stories about all of these great businesses in the square, and they need to be protected. And we love the existing architecture. The architecture of buildings like the Bank Building and St. Joseph's and the old police station. It reminds us always that the growth of Union Square is about infill. It's about creating more density, adding more places to work to go with all of these places to live and play, about making incubators for new ideas. The evolution, the growth of Union Square will be about making connections, about linking the corridors and squares, some of which exist today and some of which we will invent, making new open spaces, and transforming a lot of underutilized real estate to make a better place. Joe?
So what is the opportunity? As David mentioned, there are a lot of businesses here that you couldn't create if you started from scratch and you were doing a center or a mall. These are businesses that create an environment that's very important to us and very important to a center or a growth in the center. The real opportunity is to build on its greatest attributes, the existing elements, and make enhancements that will realize the square, its potential and its long-term impact. The vision of us as master developer is to connect the parcels. When we look at the center and we look at Boynton Yards and we look beyond, we look to see what would be the master plan for this entire area. There's a lot of connections not made that need to be done. And for us, we need to bring the businesses here to create that commercial district. The connecting of the parcels and optimizing the beauty that exists is going to be important, but we also have to create a smart footprint that's going to work for us. And what we think about is what's going to be important for a business. How is a business going to want to be here? A lot of residential exists, but you have elements that businesses will need to see before they look to expand and expand in this area. And actually, next slide. For us, there are a lot of things that make the center work. We actually had worked on a site in Boston where we didn't have an existing mix that you have in Union Square today. So we actually focused on bringing people to the neighborhood. You do that today. You have a lot of events that occur. The one that I like that I just heard about was the Fire and Ice, where you had the sculpture of the ice sculptures. And I thought, that's perfect. That's something that works. You can do that in the summer with the same artist who does those ice sculptures, do the sand sculptures. Those are things that bring people to the center. One of the best ways to do this is to continue to host events. We actually felt that as we went through the site and as we started to develop the site, we continue to do that today. We found that it creates an environment and excitement that you don't normally get. In fact, you see some of the events that we held at Fan Pier. The balloon that we brought in, that actually is a tethered balloon that has a 250-foot cable. We brought that down. One of the first people to ride on that balloon was a vice president from Vertex, who rode in the balloon, actually saw the views, went back and got excited about the site. We think you have a lot to demonstrate by bringing people down here, showing them what you have, and creating more exciting events. The commitment to shaping the neighborhood is very important to us. There's already a number of compelling reasons for people to come to Union Square, but you have now a resident base, and you have to start looking at what's going to be important for a business. The intellectual capital that a business invests in is always number one. So we are looking to bring, you're so close to colleges, you're so close to universities, we thought that the redevelopment process is, you're going to need a greater rationale for the businesses to come here. You have the green line. I just heard the green line go by, I think, with the rubbish, but I think you're going to see more, you're going to see more people come here, and you need to start focusing on where is a business going to want to be, what's going to be in it for them. So for us, working with the businesses and the employees is going to be, and the employees is going to be important. The other thing that we feel is important is the innovation that's going on. You hear about it a lot, collaboration. So for us, working with the businesses and the employees is going to be, and the employees is going to be important. The other thing that we feel is important is the innovation that's going on. You hear about it a lot, collaboration, innovation. You see and you hear a lot of these startup companies that are these little incubators that are coming together. We actually formed Mass Challenge with a group that started from nothing, but Mass Challenge actually grew where we gave them 28,000 feet, started with 5, grew to 28,000 feet, and they've created over 2,000, actually close to 3,000 jobs and millions of dollars in revenue. Those are the kinds of things that businesses, again, are attracted to, and you have that opportunity here as well. People will like to come to Union Square because they have the life, the vitality that people look for. Open space will be important too. They play games, they have a number of games that, I mean, I can tell you this, they love to play and they want coffee because they're there all night and they love to play. So you want to keep them active and keep them engaged. That's going to be very important. Building an economically viable neighborhood, I think, goes without saying. When you look at Somerville, you look at the great long-term plan. I felt it was really well done. And it's now, for us, it's now a time to start executing that plan. We think that what you've done is laid the groundwork. You spent a long time doing that. Now is the time to start looking at what are the next steps for execution. That's what we look to do. We look to execute, we look to build. We know that the residential wants to be here, but you have a great growth pattern that will look for the open space, the connection, and starting to bring businesses to see the benefits of being down in this area. You know, the fact is that we pay attention to demographics. And in Union Square, you're actually a good capsule to look at. There are a number of millennials in this area. There are a number of younger people. And younger people certainly are a trend. We know that growth is important. In fact, in this country today, you see 10,000 young adults turn 21 every day. And by the year 2025, 70 to 75% of that generation will be controlling business. So you've started that pattern. You want to continue that and keep the millennials and keep that activity down in this neighborhood.
I mentioned the personality of Union Square, and the personality of Union Square is very specific. A couple of highlights here, but from the maple bacon donuts at the Union Square Donuts to the pumpkins at Ricky's and everything in between, it is a specific personality, and we respect that, we cherish that, and we want to protect that. And you look at, Joe mentioned incubator and innovation and collaboration. You look at all the growth that you've seen in jobs and creating workplace environments in East Cambridge. What happened there, of course, is the proximity of MIT and all of that research. And then you saw the need to bring the amenities, the need to bring all the places that you already have. The residential, the fun places, the social places, the cultural places that bring people together. Reverse the equation. You've got all those amenities, and the goal is bring some of those jobs to take advantage of those amenities, create that mix of live, work, play, live, learn in Union Square. You know all the advantages of Union Square, the proximity to Tufts and MIT and to Harvard, the transportation and transit that's going to get exponentially better with the Green Line. But it's really about proximity. It's about closeness. It's about bringing people together on a regular basis that generates ideas and generates a new activity. If you look at, and you don't have to look carefully at this drawing, but it's just a diagram of the existing uses in Union Square, diagrammed by residential and commercial and institutional and government. What's interesting is the mix of colors. The mix in the very heart of Union Square, but that mix of colors shows you that there's residential there in the heart of the place today. But it also shows you there's a lot of white space. There's a lot of missing links. There's a lot of opportunity to make much better connections. And so, to give you the very simplest of visions, the most diagrammatic of visions, you know Union Square, you know the outline of the parcels that we're talking about all the way to Boynton Yards. This is kind of a look from the northwest down into Union Square today. And what's most interesting, of course, is how much open space there is, how much empty and underutilized space there is around Prospect Street. But you know Washington and Somerville Ave and where it all comes together. The real game changer, of course, is the Green Line. The Green Line creates the opportunity for real transit-oriented development. It really does change everything. It means connection. It means the opportunity to live here and work there, live here, and vice versa. All of those kinds of things. And it changes the way people live. It means that we can be more pedestrian dependent, more bike dependent, less dependent on the automobile. You look at the streets and the opportunity for some new pedestrian ways. And like I mentioned before, it's that irregular configuration of streets. It's that very special kind of non-grid of streets that we know how it evolved. We know it evolved from pedestrian paths, but it makes special spaces and it makes unique spaces. And we can make even better connections between Union Square and Boynton Yards, connections over top of the rail that will bring all of this together, bring density, bring closeness, bring proximity. All of that generates ideas. Better bike paths. We talk about bike paths all the time. You don't have very good bike paths, and they will change things. It's about the priority of pedestrians and bikes and then cars and not the reverse. And open spaces. There are some good open spaces, but you're parking some of them. And we can take some of that parking out and create better open spaces. Create open spaces that are edged and lined with uses that engage pedestrians, that become gathering places, places where people come together. Part of open space is the sidewalk network, where restaurants spill out onto the sidewalk, where the retailer, the shop can spill out onto the sidewalk, making a very active place a number of months a year. And then you start to think about, well, where do we start? Well, I think you all know, you start at the center, you start at D2, you make the connection between where there is the most activity today in the T, and you start to fill in. And the only thing I'll point to here is scale. This is more about infill. This is about identifying the important buildings that exist and then infilling. But recognizing that grain, that pattern of buildings and uses that surrounds the square and building to that pattern and scale and the passageways that go in between and making that important connection from the T north, future T station north, and into the very heart of the square. And if you look at the diagram, you'll see some words. The only thing I'll point to is at the street, it's all about drink, eat, play, all of those very social things. Above, it's about live and work. And live and work in a very diverse kind of way, with options about how to live, options about how to work, with a mixture, not big buildings that have very big floor plates. And then it builds, and it grows, and it connects, and it jumps those tracks, and it continues to grow and infill and move down into Boynton Yards. And then you begin to develop the kind of momentum where you see some of these initiatives become real companies, and you see small places become bigger places. And with it comes all of the activity that supports it. So 8 very simple urban design goals. Aspire to the highest levels of sustainability. This should be a national model for how to build a neighborhood. Plan for change. What I mean by that is this will change. Any plan will change over the life of its development, and it has to be flexible as to when you build more office, and when you build more residential, and how much retail and what kind of retail. Make places that incubate ideas, they bring jobs, leverage this funky retail restaurant environment to a place that's brimming with innovation. Make great streets with ground floor uses that engage pedestrians. Create more open space, a network of open spaces, different sizes, different kinds. Fill the holes, make the connections, and respect the historic fabric. I'll give you just 1 second about Elvis Manfredi. We do lots of different things. Our work is very diverse, and it includes lots of infill. In places like Barry's Corner in Alston, what surface parking lots today becomes retail and residential. In the Riverside neighborhood of Cambridge with wood frame housing that infilled surface parking lots, small buildings in Harvard Square, and the first 2 blocks of Assembly Row, which I'm sure many of you have seen and which you're going to see full of shops very, very soon. Sure.
Thank you, David. And so, what is the team approach? The fact is that Somervision, as good as it is, will only prove itself to be strong if the people who execute it well. What we do is we look to build. For us, it's important that we work as a team, and it's not just for us as a team, but it's also the community, the city, and the planners. As a team, one of the most important approaches for us is that everyone is on board, that it's time to execute. We believe current needs and the needs of the future look at the big picture and the sum of the parts. As you look towards the end vision, you have to get those pieces done to achieve that. So our team is comprised of, as I mentioned, David Manfredi. David has done a lot of work with us in a number of projects, and I have a huge amount of respect for David and his talent. A number of the people working on David's team actually are from Somerville. In fact, during one of our meetings to discuss this, we talked about how they get to work, and a lot of them ride their bikes. As you ride on McGrath Highway, think about riding your bike on that roadway from Boston to Somerville or Somerville to Boston. It's not an easy track, and I think there's one of the first things, no matter what is done, people start looking to get the pedestrian and the bike movement an easier route and more flexible. J.J. Vaccaro, actually, the reason I'm standing here today is because Mike Kennedy is here with Joe Vaccaro's group. They've done a number of jobs with us, and we've worked with them in the past. Joe Vaccaro is the one that brought me here 15 years ago. And 15 years ago, Joe was looking for this area to grow and to be something better. And we actually have been close to Mike and his group, but for us, now is the time, and we think it's the right time. The other team members that we have done a lot of work with us, and we're very proud of them. The planning process is actually something that's going to be an important collaboration of everybody here today, as well as with the city. We've been able to accomplish a great deal at Fanpier in a short period of time because of that. We've worked with everyone to make sure that things worked well. Fanpier, when we bought the site in 2006, the site really didn't match what we felt the needs were for that area, and we talked to the community, the city, and we changed the zoning. One of the important pieces as you go forward with this vision, and Somervision, and for Union Square, is continue to think about timing. Because as you want to build things, you have to think of the different uses and what's the right time to build. That's going to be a very important decision in any development, and it's going to be very important for Union Square to match the timing. Today, we have a great neighborhood in Fanpier. We have a strong interplay now with the commercial, the residential, and the retail. That's something that we're proud of. It took 6 years to 7 years to get there. Did you have a question? I have 5 minutes. Oh, I have 5 minutes. Next slide, next slide, next slide. No, I wanted to touch on a couple of different things. That's Vampire. It shows some of the mixes that we brought down there. Again, you look at the open space. David talked about that, but the open space, that connection, the connectivity to the different elements, that's going to be important. Putting those pieces together, the sum of the parts. More of the same. Next slide. So why do you want to talk to us? I think for us, it's a great opportunity. It's something that we feel is important. We appreciate you even listening to our story, but I think there's a lot to do. We actually have spent a lot of time in different developments and working on large scale as well as small scale to bring the bottom line to the real goal, which is getting things built. David and his group have put together a little video, a snapshot that is going to take about 2 minutes, so I'm going to grab those 2 minutes to let people see how they view where we are and where you need to be. So there's a lot to do. When we bought Vampire, we knew that as master developer there'd be a catalyst for that area. Vampire has proven to do that. I think the same is here with Union Square. Thank you for having us tonight. Now you can clap.
So I think we may as well start with Mimi's questions, and you can sit there. So she always asks strength and weakness, or challenge, and challenge, the greatest challenge and greatest weakness.
There is a challenge on making sure that everyone gets together, because for us, we're going to be in a time frame, we're going to want to see things done. That's going to be very important, that everybody commits to making things happen. I can't think of a weakness.
Okay. I think we're at around Nice. Philip, sure.
Hello. Your response to the RFQ and indeed the work you showed is very different in scale. but you obviously have a lot of sensitivity to Union Square issues, but it's very different. How would you approach this project differently in your design approach as architects and in your planning approach? People here are very sensitive to the notion of losing what they have and it becoming something generic, such as one might do on a brownfield site.
One of the things that's important is that the businesses are here, are businesses that you probably, if you started from scratch, you probably wouldn't look towards. And those businesses make up this neighborhood. That actually is the essence of Union Square. So losing that would be a huge a void that you wouldn't be able to replace. As David and I talked through in the design, every business we looked at, in fact, some of those businesses that you saw, those are important to the fabric. So on the design scale, you actually have to translate that to what's going to be the right mix of the old with the new.
And from a planning point of view, if you look at Fan Pier, and Fan Pier 10 years ago, it was a surface parking lot. It was all a surface parking lot. There was no grid of streets. There was no context there, at least the context of the rail that was long gone. There is a grid of streets. There's a scale here, and there are important historic buildings. That's why I say this is about infill. This is about recognizing the scale of existing buildings. Yeah, you're going to add density. You want to add density. You want to infill. And it's as much about the spaces between the buildings as it is the buildings themselves. Pedestrian paths, bike paths, good sidewalks, all of those kinds of things. But I think we think about this more as incremental infill. Protect what you have, preserve what you have, and build from that.
Any other questions from the CAC? Okay. Sure, come on up. And Jane, we'll switch to a few general questions if you want.
I have a two-part question. I would like to know what is your percentage of on-time completions of your projects? And the second part is, what are some of the obstacles that you had, besides the weather, what are some of the obstacles that you had to overcome and to complete your projects?
Well, all of our projects that we build on our own account, and so they're always on time for me and on budget, if not under budget. We actually, for us, we stay very focused. We have a very strong team on the construction side. Richard Martini actually is here with us today. He oversees all our construction, and Richard has forgotten more about construction than I'll ever know. But he actually stays focused on just that. That's what the team does. That's important for us because we'll do debt. We'll bring in debt to our projects, and so we actually want to make sure that we match every schedule that we present. The obstacles you're going to undergo on any construction development, really you have to focus on the beginning and the end. The beginning of any project is going to be the most important, and that's so true for Union Square. This is the time to really spend the effort to make sure it's right. That's true when you go into that next small scale or large scale building. You spend the time to plan it right. Planning is critical. You may run into obstacles underground, that's your biggest exposure. You may have weather elements, but other than that, you really have to spend the time planning, buy it right, buy it with the right contractor and subcontractors, and then focus on getting it done. The end of the project, you're going to run in time and crunch time in certain elements, but it's really the beginning and the end. So it's the obstacles in construction, that's the business we're in. That's where the flexibility comes in to make it work.
Okay, so Jane, I don't know if your question is apropos now, but we have time.
Some of it is directed much more at the Abbey Group, but there are components that would apply to you as well. Okay. I actually have spent quite a bit of time at the Fenway Station because I go to the showings of the Metropolitan Opera at the Fenway Cinema, and I actually find the pedestrian-car interface very awkward, and I think that the site is quite pedestrian unfriendly, and the building itself on the site is difficult. And so it seems to me that a recipe for success in Union Square is going to be thinking very carefully about micro connections between pedestrians and cars and the way in which buildings affect pedestrian circulation. And it seems to me that this raises a bigger question about the infrastructure. Another developer who is concerned about this site has chosen VHB as its transportation component, and some of us have not thought highly of their work, and I'm not clear about the transportation group that whom you would be working with, and so I'm very interested in that, and I'm also interested in how you would deal with the fact that Union Square is an urban watershed. This actually is a question that would apply to both groups. I'm also interested in the issue of the balance of old and new, because Harvard Square has become a very uninteresting place because a lot of the old businesses can't afford to be there anymore. And so I'm wondering how it is that one creates an environment in which old businesses can afford to stay.
Will you listen to the answer?
I agree with you. I think you have to look at what we did at Landmark Center not from where it started, and the physical improvements. We took a 4-acre parking lot, turned it into a park, created significant pedestrian infrastructure, and it may not be perfect, but it's a far cry from where it was when we started, and we're proud of those improvements. There's always room for further improvements, and we recognize that, and that's part of what an evolving project is. You can't do what Union Square Development is asking for in 3, 4, 5 years. This is a 10, 15-year project, and as things evolve, we'll all learn together what works and what doesn't work, and we'll continue to make improvements. Fenway, if you talk about a watershed, Fenway and Landmark Center in particular is right at the heart of the failure of the MDC waterways. We had to put significant flood control measures into the building, and it is now, and not due to us, but due to the Army Corps of Engineers, but because of the parcel that we donated back to the city for its use, we're daylighting, the daylighting of the Muddy River is taking place right now, all flood mitigation programs. I don't know if I remembered all of the questions, but that's what I can answer off the top of my head. Oh, Billy, maybe you want to talk about our transportation team.
Yeah, so our transportation team is niche engineering, not VHB. They're very good, very good.
Thanks, Joe, for allowing that question. So I think we're going to stop. Okay, it needs to be quick, though, because we've got, but we've got about 10 minutes of wrap-up, so yeah, if you take 30 seconds, that's fine, but we got to get this wrapped up.
I just wondered if the other teams wanted to address the watershed question.
We're not talking. Actually, in any environment in this region, you're always going to be dealing with the watershed. We actually have our engineers study that up front. We work through the city because the city is very much aware of what's going on. So the watershed issue is common for this region, so it's something that we deal with on an everyday basis.
And you had one question, but it's got to be short if that's okay.
Mi nombre es Félix Lugo, y es mi traductora. Mi pregunta es acerca de la crisis de parqueo que estamos viviendo en la ciudad de Somerville. En estos nuevos proyectos, desarrollos que están implementando en la ciudad de Somerville, ¿qué piensan hacer para que mejore esa situación? Y de una vez quiero hacerle un referendo o un referimiento a la ciudad de Cambridge. Nuestra vecina ciudad de Cambridge tiene una crisis de parqueo inmensa y nosotros nos encaminamos en esa dirección. También la otra parte es, ¿qué piensan ustedes hacer para que en las propiedades para renta y para los negocios no se disparen? Porque actualmente ya hay personas que le están pidiendo las casas y los locales de negocio a la gente porque como viene esa obra, piensan hacer nuevos negocios que le vas a convenir más. ¿Qué piensan hacer al respecto?
So my name is Felix Lugo. I live on Bow Street, and I have a two-part question. The first is about the crisis of parking that we have in Somerville, and what are you guys going to do to make sure that this doesn't continue? And I want to use the example of Cambridge, our neighboring city, which also has a very serious problem with parking. And the second part of my question is really about affordability, and what are you going to do to make sure that both tenants and local businesses are not displaced throughout this process? Because already I know a lot of folks who are looking for housing in Somerville, a lot of commercial tenants who can't afford their rent, and so, and I think this is a question, it's para todos, ¿no?
Sí.
So this is really a question for all the developers of what are you going to do to prevent displacement of residents and local businesses?
Yeah, parking actually is an important, that's a very good question, because with business, you're going to start to have to look to accommodate their needs. As I mentioned earlier, the millennial generation is actually changing how parking works. And in Boston, 14% fewer cars exist there today than they did 7 years ago. That's primarily because a lot of people are using bikes, they walk, and they look to the T. So the T, bringing the T to this area becomes critical for the business side of the use. On the affordability is going to be it's going to have to be worked into the residential. We do that today. We have affordability within the, oh, actually it was affordability of the existing. And businesses and yeah, but the existing, again, you go back to the mom and pops. We can only work with the properties that we control. There will have to be, again, with the community and the city, an understanding of what those businesses are that are important, and working with the owners of those buildings to make sure that they do stay. On the affordability on housing, we look to bring affordable units to the development itself and blend it in with the normal, regular housing.
Thank you very much.
Do you want to comment briefly? And then I think we're going to have to move to wrap up the meeting.
Just first off, in terms of, where's the gentleman? In terms of affordability, we have a lot of experience with incorporating affordable housing into our developments, and that is a commitment that we bring, a strong commitment of ours. We also have a strong commitment to community uses and community partnerships and spaces that directly support the community, like a community center. Another thing to point out is that the inevitability of, with the Green Line coming and development on its way, there is going to be the possibility that the prices go up. An interesting thing about that, though, is that the best way to deal with that is with affordable housing, and the second best way is to add residential stock. And by adding residential stock, the relationship between supply and demand is more in the favor, and it slows that process down. And then the second question was in terms of parking. Well, so there is a question of how do you deal with parking in terms of D2, which really is the first parcel. D2 needs to support itself with its own parking needs within the site, so that it doesn't add any more to the existing problem. And then the question is whether or not there is a way to consolidate parking in a second stage of the development, and that would be the job of working through that together.
Okay, so we're going to wrap it up tonight. I want to thank all the developers, if you could. As we said last week, this is really a remarkable amount of energy that these teams have put into thinking about Union Square, and I think that's three things at least: the Green Line coming, the work of the city, but really also the identity that everybody has already given to Union Square. And so I think that is a great foundation to move forward. I'm gonna hand it to Ed, but first I want to say, so next week there's an infrastructure meeting. It's not strictly speaking a CAC meeting, but we do want people to come and understand the infrastructure planning that's being done for Union Square. Then the week after next, we will start as the CAC to talk about the presentations we've seen and their relative strengths and how we might make a recommendation to the Somerville Redevelopment Authority with the assistance of the staff. And in connection with that, I want to say that Amanda has put a lot of information up on the website. My understanding is that the presentations will also go up on the website. So for people who don't want to go through a 150-page write-up, but who want to review the presentations that have been given the last 3 weeks, those will be available. You can probably scan them pretty quickly. And I've also asked Ed to check with the city about what part of the deliberations should be private if we're talking about private business information, and which part should be public, and how we're going to do that. I don't expect guidance on that tonight, but I want to make sure that we do the right thing. Philip, what do you have?
Wig, I was just wondering, these have been very well-attended meetings by people who are not on the CAC. What opportunities are there for them to voice their response to the 9 presentations and to share those with the city and with the CAC?
That's a great question. So the question, I guess everybody heard. I think that the city can serve as a collector and distributor of comments on the presentations and on the future of Union Square. And folks who have further thoughts that they didn't get a chance to bring up in the public forums can certainly email Amanda and Ed at City Hall, and I think we'll get those out to the CAC. I also want, can everybody on the CAC to just raise their hands? So there's actually been terrific attendance by this group. It's a lot of time already. I want to thank them. I want to especially thank Mimi for supplying many of the questions. I know, but it got repeated once or twice. So, yeah. So there have been there's 2 tentative meetings, but I think I think those will probably be the meetings, but I think we also need to get the protocol from Ed on how we're going to run those meetings. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to him. I think they'll be at the same time. They'll pretty much always start at 6.
Thanks, Wig. Exactly. We now come to the hard part, and that is we have heard from 9 well-qualified, very able teams who want very much to be our partner over the long term. The fact is, some will rise and some will fall. Now we need to move on to the next phase of the work that the CAC does. We met really informally in the last week in January. We are about 7 weeks into what we anticipated would be a 2-year work period of working with a master developer, working on the infrastructure, our improvements, working with the T. So we need to begin to think about what comes next. As I said, we have scheduled meetings here in this room for April the 1st and April the 8th. I'm sorry, April the 2nd and April the 8th. We have tried to make available everything that we have received as part of the RFQ process. Anything we hear from any one of the teams, we post online. I must harass Amanda 5 or 6 times a day, just saying, send this email, make sure that they have that. So we have tried very hard to run this in a very open and fair way. The Redevelopment Authority wanted to put another set of eyes on this. They have done so. They are waiting for your recommendations. Again, we need your input. What we need to do is we need to bring a paired list of folks back to the CAC and give you the opportunity, and the SRA the opportunity, to speak to what is your approach. We want to give the CAC the opportunity to look at the finances of each team. We need to give you the opportunity to ask, where does Union Square fit into your timetable, your schedule. What else have you got that might not allow you to work on this project? As Wig said, we at OSPCD are going to do our own internal review. I think what you'll see in each of the RFQs, there is a matrix that the development team has added. Amazingly enough, each of them fit each of the criteria, but what we need to do at the staff level is begin to poke into that and just see where we think our best opportunity is, make our recommendations to the CAC, and then work with you. There are, as I said, many matrices out there. Joe has started work on a matrix. Where the CAC goes is really up to you, how you want to review it, but we need you to review it. I want to say absolutely and unequivocally, when we at the staff level review each of the RFQ responses, we will look towards matters of new housing opportunities. We want first quality housing, especially affordable housing. We want exciting retail that can work with the retail that is in the square now. We want open space that is absolutely first rate, but again, don't have any doubt about the fact that the overriding qualification that we will look for at the staff level is the proven ability to enhance an existing neighborhood and the proven experience that will lead us sort of think that this party can best bring in the types of uses that we emphasized within the master plan and within the revitalization plan. New office space, new lab space, new R&D space. That will be the first overriding standard that we will apply on our own internal review. So we expect to see many of you back here to meet with the team. Better Streets next week, the 25th. I know. Team Better Block, my apologies again. And then we will begin to review them, the RFQ responses on April the 2nd and April the 8th. But I would ask, do so in your own time. Go through each one of the RFQ responses, go online, and go back to the items, the priorities that each and every one of you identified that first time that we met as a group. So with that, thank you very much. I appreciate everyone's hard work and their commitment. Thank you.
I realized you sent an email to me, didn't you? Didn't you? Wasn't it a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago?